Doctor Who is in a bit of a weird place at the moment. It feels like only yesterday that the entire fandom, I say the entire fandom, 99% of the fandom was celebrating the return of Russell T Davies and the team over at Bad Wolf.
I'm actually in shock.
And he might bring a younger audience in.
I'm gunning for you, Russ.
I'm not even a Doctor Who fan and I got excited.
There was sort of a general fandom consensus that as soon as they came back, Doctor Who would go back to the glory days. Toys R Us would return, the shops would be filled with Doctor Who merch, and everyone could kind of live their childhood again, because adulthood it just doesn't hit the same. But genuinely, how come nobody teaches you how to do taxes? Anyway, back to what I was saying about Doctor Who. So how and why have, once again, we reached the point where half the fandom is absolutely convinced that the show is going to be cancelled, or at least put on hiatus? We're only really one season in. Not now, Ian. Join me in today's video as I explore all of the reasons why I think this current era of Doctor Who isn't quite living up to the hype, and why there is genuinely a possibility that the show has either been cancelled or will be going on a hiatus. This isn't just going to be me tearing down Doctor Who. I mean, I love this show. That should be quite apparent by the existence of this channel. And it's also not to say I didn't even enjoy the new era. I mean, look at this clip. Shout out to Russell. There were such highs and lows of this new season, and I'm going to give as much constructive criticism as I can. Anyway, why do people think the show's being cancelled at the moment? Well, 2 days ago, Bad Wolf posted this. We loved having Doctor Who and Dope Girls film with us during 2024, and are excited to welcome new productions to Cardiff. They then go on to advertise their studios, edit suites, workshops, and backlot. A lot of people have picked up on the wording. Loved having. It's past tense. And I just kind of want to dispel this immediately. I don't think that immediately rings alarm bells. As YouTuber Mr. TARDIS points out, there are many reasons as to why Bad Wolf would be advertising studio space. It doesn't mean they're not ever doing Doctor Who again. Also, if I were to say to you, I loved having my friend round for dinner, that doesn't mean I plan on never inviting them round again. What it does kind of imply, though, is a bit of a hiatus. It's been said 101 times, but also Disney's refusal to actually acknowledge whether they're commissioning a season 3 of Doctor Who is kind of worrying. Way back when this Disney deal began, Russell said they were shooting 2 seasons basically back to back to ensure that we got yearly Doctor Who. But that pipe dream has kind of disappeared. There's no way we're going to be able to get yearly Doctor Who. Then whenever asked, Russell said, oh well, we're not going to be commissioned until after season 2. And I can't lie, this does kind of imply that Disney aren't that happy with the Doctor Who partnership. There's also loads of rumours and speculations and things that I've heard, which I'm not going to say in this video because I have no idea whether they're concrete, but it's not necessarily looking good. I do genuinely think there is a possibility Disney have refused to pick up the show. I mean, the viewing figures for the last season were the lowest Doctor Who's ever had. And that isn't to say it's because it was bad, I think it's because of a variety of reasons. And I do want to make it clear, this isn't me just going, oh, Russell T Davies and all of the Bad Wolf team, they've ruined the show. They absolutely haven't. So if that's what you're here for, if you're about to comment, rip Doctor Who, go away.
Get out.
So let's dive into the why. A really interesting YouTube video I saw recently was made by Stu Bagful, in which he poses the question, is Doctor Who outdated? He makes some very interesting points, so I advise you go and watch the video after my video. Finish this one first. But no, it's a genuinely good video, but my answer to that question, plain and simply, is no. Doctor Who is not outdated, but Doctor Who in its current form is incredibly outdated. Even down to the writing team. As I say, I love Russell T Davies, I love Stephen Moffat, but we really need to hear from new voices. What? Okay, point one, don't worry, it's literally just been announced. They are hiring lots of new writers to write for the upcoming season. It will feel fresh and there will be fresh voices, overseen by Russell T Davies, which I can't lie, that was literally the idea I had written down. I was about to pose this idea. These are fresh voices and fresh opinions coming to the show, so that's exciting, because I do think Rogue last season, that was written by new writers, and it was definitely one of the standout episodes. But why are these new writers so essential? I think sometimes the idea of a writing team, which, full credit to Chris Chibnall, was planned in Series 11 and did happen, I do think that might be the best way to go about the show, because let's look at the episode The Star Beast, for example, the first episode of this new era. I think it's so close to being a really, really solid piece of television, but it's let down by a couple of moments. I've got to say, as someone who is the same age as the character Rose Noble, some of the dialogue that she was given in that episode, just, it didn't feel realistic. It came across as a bit cringy.
You're assuming he as a pronoun. I'm gonna get my phone.
The vegan one is in the flowers.
What am I eating? Something a male presenting Time Lord will never understand.
Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure Russell went in with good intention. And there was some fantastic trans representation in the episode as well. The scene between Donna and Sylvia in the kitchen, like, excellent stuff. But the line, something a male Time Lord would never understand. While editing, I've tried to rack my brain and come up with 3 explanations as to what this quote may mean. Possibility number 1, is it a joke that the 10th Doctor said, I don't want to go, and it's that face, so they're saying, just let go? Is that the joke? Probably not. Okay, option 2, is it a deep cut lore reference, which Russell would make, like some of the stuff, like in The Devil's Cord, the way he explained away the 6-month time jump? Is it a lore reference to the fact that female Time Lords like Romana have more control over their regenerative abilities? Or maybe it is just as simple as it's a joke at like, oh, men can't let things go, which, I don't know, I feel like that could be a funny joke, but it doesn't come across, it just comes across as bizarre. It did kind of pull myself and everyone else who I was watching the episode with out of the episode. Like, people in my generation don't actually speak like that. But all that did was give cannon fodder to right-wing reactionaries, and people can just go, oh, Doctor Who's woke. Psychopaths like Andrew Tate reacted to the Star Beast, and it brought us this clip.
Who the f*** is Meep?
By no means am I saying we should bow to the right-wing reactionaries. Characters like Rose are vitally important to have in Doctor Who. But equally as important is the writing of these characters. Writers like Juno Dawson have been brought in to write for the upcoming episodes because their perspective will probably help improve the writing. I also think a big thing is new formatting. Once again, Chibnall was ahead of the curve. Making a series like Flux, where it's all one big serialised story, is so zeitgeist. That is exactly what we need in this day and age, especially if you're making Doctor Who a streaming show. It's exclusive to Disney+, meaning anyone who watches the show, they're not going to be watching the odd episode, they're not going to be catching a stray episode, they're going to binge watch it from episode 1 to the finale. Like, in the streaming day and age, there isn't really a place for, like, Monster of the Week storytelling. Sure, if it's broadcast on TV, you might tune in one week and watch Rogue, tune in the next and watch The Legend of Ruby Sunday. But if it's on a streaming service, which this primarily is, especially because most of the views come from iPlayer anyway, people start at episode 1, then go episode 2, then episode 3, then episode 4. You don't have to worry about losing the audience. Tell a serialised story. And that's not to say you can't do kind of like one-off episodes, like Flux has War of the Sontarans and Village of the Angels. They're kind of their own thing, but they're also part of this overarching narrative. It's just baffling to me that we've kind of reverted back to the 2005 era. The episodes are still 45 minutes. They're all Monster of the Week, and then on to the next thing. Like, it's outdated. It's kind of what Stu Bagfull says in this video. You wouldn't launch a new TV show with that formula anymore. The only reason Doctor Who's still doing it is because that's what used to work. Well, I honestly don't think it works anymore. That's not to say you can't have fun episodes and good writing, it's the viewing habits of the people watching. I also suggest playing about with the runtime of the episodes. Maybe it's time to go full circle, back to Classic Who, and release like shorter 25-minute stories, or maybe 1 hour long episodes. Just play about with it a little bit, make it feel fresh, make it feel new. I honestly think the best case scenario would be 8 one-hour episodes of a big serialised story which wraps up that season's arc by the end. It would also stop the problem of villains like Sutek just came and went so easily. He was literally put on a leash and flung into the vortex. Imagine you had 8 episodes. You build up for the first couple of who's the villain gonna be? Oh no, it's Sutek, how do we defeat him? Oh no, the universe has gone to dust. Do you know what I mean? That would have been a really interesting story to tell over 8 episodes, and you could still have slid in episodes like Rogue, The Devil's Chords, Space Babies. Any of these episodes you could kind of fit into that plot. There's also a show on BBC iPlayer I saw which is vastly different to Doctor Who, but it's called Cheaters, and I think the episodes are only like 15 minutes long each. So I was really intrigued. I clicked on episode 1 and then just found myself binging it because there was cliffhanger after cliffhanger after cliffhanger, and it was all about personal stakes. And I do think maybe Doctor Who could try something like that. Maybe that's too experimental, but I don't know. I think cliffhangers are also the big important thing. If it's serialised, you've got people coming back. Like, that's what you need to ensure, that people keep coming back. The viewing figure things will be out there somewhere, but I remember that the people that subscribed to Disney Plus for Doctor Who, I think it was about 60% of people dropped off after episode 3. That, as I say, that may be slightly off, but it's something around that area. You can look it up. But I think if there were proper cliffhangers and proper setup, people wouldn't switch off. They'd tune in week by week to find out what happens. You see, there's just no urgency with, like, non-serialised storytelling anymore. I also think, I mean this in the politest way possible, but starting your season with Space Babies and ending with the Empire of Death was quite possibly the biggest misstep Doctor Who has made in God knows how long. This was supposed to be the reboot. Like, this is people's first ever impression of Doctor Who, and you give them Space Babies. Now, that's not to say the episode's written badly. I genuinely quite enjoy it. I think it's quite funny, but that's not the first impression of Doctor Who you should give. Look at 2005, because this is what confuses me. Russell has launched Doctor Who perfectly before. 2005, you have Rose, you slowly introduce the audience to this world. Like, it's quite a human threat. Shop window dummies are something we've all seen, so them coming to life, it's quite realistic. Like, obviously it's not realistic, but you know what I mean. And I guess you could go, oh, we've all seen babies, but not babies in space with a bogeyman.
I love Ruby. She said there's no such thing as the bogeyman.
It just doesn't, that's not the first impression you should give people of Doctor Who. But I think fundamentally it feels like a kid's show. I also thought it felt a little bit rushed, like they kind of speed ran all the things that Russell did in his first era. Giving Ruby a TARDIS key after that one adventure, sure, we met her in church on Ruby Road, but like, the Doctor's only known her a matter of hours, and he's already giving her the TARDIS key. That would be fine if it sort of was a character thing, and it came back to haunt him, or maybe him and Ruby had an argument, but nothing ever happens. Because that's the thing, they don't argue. The reason companions like Donna...
I'm telling you, take this thing back!
...and Bill Potts...
Why can't I be angry? Yes, don't tell me I can't be angry!
...and Rose Tyler...
I did it again, I picked another stupid ape.
...and Clara Oswald...
Making me feel like a bloody idiot!
Language.
Oh, don't you ever tell me to mind my language! Don't you ever!
...go down as some of the best written Doctor Who companions is because they have proper screaming matches with the Doctor. They shout. Because also, let's be real, in real life, anyone you're close to, you will have argued with at least once. Especially if you're in life-ending, life-endangering space situations, tensions are gonna bubble. Why did Ruby never shout at the Doctor? Like, just genuinely, like, stop and think for a second. Russell is brilliant at characterisation. And it's not just within Doctor Who. Bob and Rose. It's a Sin. The Second Coming. There are so many brilliantly written Russell T Davies characters, and it just makes me go, like, what happened here? Because that characterisation is kind of non-existent in Season 1. Now, once again, I do think this problem's going to be kind of rectified with Season 2, and I am very excited for our new companion, Belinda Chandra. From the trailers we've seen, she's a reluctant traveller with the Doctor, and the first clip we see of her in the trailer is her arguing with the Doctor about wanting to go back home.
Doctor, you need to get me home.
Which, that's brilliant. Let's have more arguments on the TARDIS. I also think the time they release the episodes is wrong. Dropping the episodes at midnight, like, I can get why in principle it would have worked. I was quite optimistic about it, but if we're being real, it hasn't really worked. I think it removes that sense of urgency to watch the episode, it removes the feeling of the episode as an event. And sure, it doesn't really affect me personally. As I say, I was at uni when this season was airing, and we were uni students. Like, 12 o'clock, that's practically the morning. So sure, we did get the event of let's all sit down in the living room and watch Doctor Who. But for families, no kid and their parents are going to stay up till midnight to watch Doctor Who drop on iPlayer. Some of my fond childhood memories are getting ready at home, sat round with my family to watch a new episode of Doctor Who when it would drop at about 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, that's a reasonable time. And I get why they have to do it because of the deal with Disney. But I don't know. I don't even have a proper solution to pose to you other than just not at midnight. And I do think this release time contributed to the lower viewing figures. I personally know a lot of people who were planning on watching the new season, but didn't really know when it was on, so they just kind of never picked it up. They might have watched Space Babies, but then they went, this really isn't for me, and then they just dropped off. If you had a serialised story that released as an event, I guarantee people would watch, because the talent behind the writing is there. Tying in with that point of serialised storytelling, I think tone is incredibly important. Season 1, as in Ncuti's first season, it was tonally everywhere. And I get it was a kind of experimental season, like having Space Babies, The Devil's Chord, Boom, then 73 Yards, then Dot and Bubble. That was just kind of wild. There was no tonal consistency there at all. You had Space Babies, which was a kind of kids episode, Devil's Chord, over-the-top theatrical musical episode, Boom, hard sci-fi stereotypical Doctor Who, 73 Yards was basically an episode of The Twilight Zone, Dot and Bubble was basically an episode of Black Mirror. It didn't feel tonally consistent, which I think in this day and age throws people off. Let's just take a quick look at some of the most successful streaming shows. Stranger Things is incredibly tonally consistent. When you watch an episode, you know what you're in for. Breaking Bad, incredibly tonally consistent. Game of Thrones, incredibly tonally consistent. I know it's a different genre altogether, but even Friends, it's incredibly tonally consistent. Audiences want to know what they're going to watch when they tune into a TV show. Of course, there are shows like Inside Number 9 or Black Mirror, which have been incredibly successful, and they have different stories and different tones each week. But because they're anthologies, it's very different. There's no Doctor and Ruby that are the same characters going from episode to episode. Those shows are more like their own bunch of short films. Whereas Doctor Who has returning characters and overarching narratives, so it doesn't quite work as an anthology. There's so much choice of what to watch nowadays that if you have no idea what the tone of the next episode will be, you might be inclined to just go, well, I'm not going to risk it. I know what the tone of The Mandalorian is, so I'm going to watch that instead. I also think character arcs, I know I've already touched on character, but creating really strong, engaging character arcs that aren't just mystery boxes. Sure, you know what, I'll hold my hands up. Russell, your creation of the mystery boxes for Susan Twist, Mrs. Flood, they're doing this YouTube channel wonders. There's so much theory and speculation, but the problem is, if they aren't satisfying character payoffs that deal with the character's emotions, it kind of feels cheap. And I think this is why there was a lot of complaints about Empire of Death. Who's Ruby's mum? She's a nobody. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But, Don't set her up. Like, what does Maestro say? She's like, this creature is wrong. There's a hidden song inside her soul. And why did it snow? And then also you've got, like, I know Russell acknowledges it on the audio commentary, but why did Ruby's mum dress up like she was in the Traitors to drop baby Ruby at that church? Like, she's in a big medieval cloak for no reason, and Russell just goes, yeah, well, it's because the story required it. Like, he actually said that in the audio commentary. He goes, oh, it's because the story requires it. I like to imagine you wrote it. He's like, I like to imagine it's time shrouding her. But, like, come on. Because it's a nice reveal, and I get it. It's a response to the backlash for Rey Skywalker and that the whole message of The Last Jedi being a nobody can become a somebody. But the internal logic of the story still needs to be coherent. I also think if Disney are unhappy with their Doctor Who deal, and look, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know about the legal logistics, and maybe they're trying, maybe they will, get the back catalogue of Doctor Who on Disney+. It does insanely well on iPlayer. I mean, I literally went onto iPlayer 2 days ago to watch the new episode of Would I Lie to You, and it said, like, trending at the top. And number 2 trending was Doctor Who 2005 to 2022. Like, it wasn't even the new season, the backlog trends. It's why the Whoniverse on iPlayer is such a genius play from Russell. Like, I genuinely think he was like, that's exactly what Doctor Who needs, and it's a shame that they don't get that in other countries. Because sure, a lot of it's a bit old now, but, like, it's brilliant television. And if they enjoyed Shooty, to bridge the gap, they can go back and watch all the old episodes. I do think as well, the problem Doctor Who has at the moment is the jumping on point, there isn't a good jumping on point. Because 2005, Rose is a brilliant episode, but it's quite outdated. Like, I've tried to show it to people who've never seen Doctor Who, and they're kind of like, oh, I don't get it. And I kind of see why, not because it's bad, but it's very, very of its time. It's such a 2005 episode, and that's not to say it's bad at all, but it's tricky to get people into it. Then I suppose you could go with the 11th Hour, but once again, it feels quite old, and there's so much show to watch after that. And then the next sort of reboot is the pilot, but like, as much as I love Series 10, that I don't think is a fresh jumping on point. That is if you tuned out of Doctor Who, you can jump back in on this episode. Then you've got The Woman Who Fell to Earth, which it's good, but then the Ghost Monument's terrible. And then that brings us up to The Church on Ruby Road, which it's fine, but also I think tonally, once again, it feels a bit like a kid's show with the singing goblins. Another interesting insight from the Stu Bagful video was that maybe Doctor Who, this iteration of Doctor Who, just isn't made for us anymore. It's deliberately slightly appealing to a younger audience to bring in the next generation of Doctor Who fans. Which, you know what, in principle, that's a good idea. But I do think they've gone about it in completely the wrong way. Because kids love media that makes them feel like they're grown up for watching it. Like, for example, my younger sister and all her friends, when they were in probably like, I don't know, year 6, year 7, like age 10 or age 9, they were like obsessed with Stranger Things because it was a bit darker, it was a bit grittier, it was kind of like, oh, this is proper drama. I know myself as a kid, I didn't watch loads of kids shows past like the age of 5. I watch things like Doctor Who, which, yeah, sure, it is kind of a kid's show, but it also makes you feel a little bit grown up for watching it. And I'm not saying that Space Babies talks down to kids, but I don't think it gives you that scare. I mean, Doctor Who has been known since its conception for being a show that scares kids. Look at Mary Whitehouse and all of that drama from back in the day. Like, Doctor Who is meant to terrify you. If you go up to any random 50-year-old on a British street, maybe 60-year-old, and go, like, what do you think of Doctor Who? They'll go, oh, I tell you what, mate, I hid behind the sofa at the Daleks. And I don't know why they're from Gloucestershire. So many people's memories of Doctor Who, even people my age, go, oh yeah, I don't really watch it, but the Weeping Angels terrified me. People want to be scared by Doctor Who, and I feel like you've kind of removed the scary element, apart from in an episode like 73 Yards. Like, if I'd watched that when I was younger, that woman being in the distance would definitely have been something which I remembered. It very much reminded me of the Watcher from the Fourth Doctor Regeneration story Logopolis. That imagery has stuck with me for years. Like, I remember seeing that as a kid and being like, that is proper creepy. The music, the way the Watcher was just stood there, the lack of an explanation for what it even is. Like, the Watcher's such a cool idea, and it wasn't even the antagonist. Like, make Doctor Who scary. Don't talk down to kids. Give them something that they will genuinely be terrified at, but also love. There's this filmmaker who says that you can show a child the scariest story ever, but as long as you give it a triumphant and happy ending, then you know what? They're here for it. They want to watch it. I mean, as a kid, I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but watching things like Courage the Cowardly Dog, like, it was terrifying. Like, you want to be scared when you watch these things. Doctor Who isn't just a light entertainment show. And I just worry that this new era didn't start off on the best foot. Episode 1 and the finale that's how people are going to remember the season. So having the two weakest episodes as episode 1 and the finale is it doesn't work. I think we're also in desperate need of a new iconic villain or overarching threat. And I can't lie, Sutekh almost could have been this. Sure, he's not new, but he was only in one prior episode, and you can kind of mould him to be the character you want. Doctor Who needs a Thanos equivalent. The last truly iconic alien we got was the Weeping Angels. I mean, things like the Ood, the Judoon, the Weeping Angels, all of that's from New Who, and those monsters and designs still stay to this day. But since the original Russell T Davies 1 era, we haven't really had any new creatures which have stuck around. And I think that just makes the show feel a bit stagnant. Like, we need new big bads. We need new villains and monsters and alien designs that kids are going to go, oh my gosh, it's that monster. I mean, season 1, you had the Bogeyman. And I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole series because you've got slugs, you've got bird people, but they're not going to be remembered forever. Do you know what I mean? We need new Ood, new Judoon, new monsters. And have a Thanos-type threat that goes maybe even throughout multiple seasons, like a proper big bad that Ncuti's 15th Doctor, that's the enemy. That's the enemy. Like, the Daleks acted as that for the original Doctor Who. Like, it was the Doctor and the Daleks had that personal connection of the Time War. They were, like, kind of the last of each other's species. Like, there was all that drama there. But nowadays, like, I don't know, we need a new big bad. Also, this point may be redundant by the fact that I've never produced a television show, but what were they doing with the budget? Because this is by far the highest budget Doctor Who there's ever been. And rather than, like, let's look at Boom. Rather than going to a quarry, they chose to rebuild, like, make a quarry and then use, like, the volume to do the sky. You could have solved that by going to a quarry and filming. Like, and then you could have put loads of more budget into other things. Also, like, do you really need to spend so much money on making babies talk? Like, an episode like 73 Yards has a brilliant premise that doesn't need to spend thousands and thousands of pounds. So, like, Doctor Who does work low budget, but when you're given a high budget, use it. Maybe that's a redundant point, maybe that's a bit harsh, but I don't know. I think, yeah, you could utilise the budget and the stories better. I've thought of another example as well, like in The Devil's Cord, they rebuilt, like they'd found a hall. You know the big confrontation scene between Ruby the Doctor and Maestro? They'd found an actual real hall that they could shoot in, that they were going to use. It basically looks the same, but they wanted Ruby to levitate off the ground. So instead, because they couldn't do the wiring in the real hall, they rebuilt the entire room in a studio. And that just, like, is it worth it? Like, could you not just have Ruby incapacitated in some other way? Do you know what I mean? But then I do question whether they also needed it for the musical number to do the rain. but then they only used one corridor. I don't know, let me know your thoughts on the budget thing in the comments. And I do have to give credit where credit's due. The VFX did look brilliant. Like, sure, I'm not a fan of Sutek the dog, but Sutek the dog looked fantastic. And all the shots of, like, the TARDIS whizzing around. There weren't really any bad VFX throughout the entire show, so that's pretty cool. And I mean, rounding off the video as a whole, like, I know there was a lot of negativity there, but as I said from this reaction clip, I do genuinely really like Doctor Who. I know I've just complained about it, but it's the best show on television, and I just worry that it may face a hiatus. Ian, we've talked about this. But to answer the question that this video poses, is Doctor Who going to be cancelled? No, I don't think it will. I think it's at least got another couple of seasons in it. Maybe it will have a hiatus, maybe it will be retired for a bit, but there's no way Doctor Who's going away forever. It's survived this long, so let's not panic. If you enjoyed this video, please go and check out my Patreon, check out my Doctor Who fan films, become a channel member. You know, there's loads of stuff for you to do to show your support. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.